Hi everyone, my name is Sylvia Gallusser. I'm a global futurist and I'm based in California. I'm very excited to join you today at this session of the Future Summit to talk about one of my favorite topics, namely the home of the 2020s. A few words about myself before we start. I am French and American. I live in San Francisco, and I created a company called Silicon Humanism, which is both a research and a consulting company. I conduct foresight projects and research projects around the futures, namely interested in the future of work and mental health at work specifically, the future of education, and especially what happens following the crisis or in the midst of the crisis that happened in our world this past 2 years. And following that thread, I was interested in exploring the future of our home, since a lot of education and work happen at home with this specific resilience and mental health aspect. On the side, I'm also working as a mentor for the Sustainable Ocean Alliance. I'm really dedicated to the future of aging, interested into what we could call well aging. How can we better age and live longer in really nice condition, not just thanks to technology, but thanks to a more holistic approach to our lifestyle. And I'm also interested in the ethics of our future. And a few months ago, we started with the Association of Professional Futurists and Ethics and Philosophy of Futures discussion group. So I really invite you to follow all we've been doing in that field. But right now, what we're going to talk about is the home of the 2020s and how to make our homes more resilient in the future. Before we start, I would like to introduce you to my framework, the way I work and conduct my project. So this is a representation of the strategic foresight methodology I'm following. Usually, where I like to start, even before I look at the present and even less at the future, I start to look back with the hope that looking back will help me look better forward. So looking back to better look forward is the first step. The objective at this first step is really about identifying long-term trends, sometimes over thousands of years. Also cycles and also invariants, things that are not changing that we can rely on in the long term. What I use here is really different approaches according to different disciplines. So this is really a multidisciplinary mindset that we have as we start approaching the topic, be it about remote work, be it about the future of fashion, or be it, as right now, about the future of our health. So I would look at the historical approach, at the sociological approach, anthropological, philosophical, psychological, and so on, so that we can set the groundwork, the landscape. Knowing this, having made this first study, I will then start doing what futurists are known for, namely scanning for signals from the future. So really consider signals from the future, sometimes also called weak signals. There are things that are namely already there around us, signs of the future, that the future is already a little there. But these signals are usually hard to capture if you are not looking well enough, because they are not in the data there. They are not in the big trends, so you have to look closely in your environment. And we like to take the pastel approach, looking at political, economical, social, technological, environmental, and legal environments. And more, what we are adding to this pastel approach is ethical, which is now the steeper approach. The objective by scanning for these signals, which can be a new behavior, or a new policy, a new technology, a new application, a new star, anything that can really be a disruptor if it gets extrapolated, if it becomes commonplace. So this will help us pinpoint drivers, nation trends and inflection points as signs of the future force. What we do from there, we analyze these signals and we try to extrapolate them into scenarios because we want to project ourselves and stakeholders we're working with on the futures of the industry. So we use different tools, from signal extrapolation to using the 4 alternative futures from data, growth, constraints, collapse, and transform. We also use some tools such as the futures where we map a road to the future and we work on persona, because empathy and being able to project yourself in the tools, in the shoes of someone is a very strong tool. We use also a day in the life approach to imagine what it would be like to wake up in such a future. And we do also sometimes some 5 sense meditation to really start to envision the future through our all 5 senses. And this leads us sometimes, and I think that's a really great tool, to build, to craft artifacts from the future, to build, to write, or to sometimes film also future fiction. The idea here is really to create an experience of the future, to give it to see and to feel, to evoke emotion that will trigger into action. And from there, last but not least, a very important step is how do we backcast from this preferred future or these areas of opportunities that we identify in those futures to what we can do now. So we will find what are the milestones, how do we react through each of the steps to be able to go back to that future. So that induces some iterative process. The objective can be to evolve some current products to make them fit these preferred futures we have. We can evolve the design of our product, but we can just simply future-proof our business as well, work on our workplace, make it more suited for the future. The tools we use are roadmap to the futures or evolution of product specifications, action planning, business planning, all the tools you use in regular strategy. So the work we've been doing with the home actually covered these different steps. So you will see the results of this work, which I will try to drive you through right now. So mainly our idea was to find a good framework to explain what is changing and what type of home we're going to have in the future. So that's why we called it 4 archetypes of future homes that I will introduce shortly. So the idea at the start is that the pandemic has redesigned our home landscape, transforming our everyday environment, while also accentuating changes that were previously underway. So an accelerator of trends here. The home of the 2020s we see is experiencing a crucial mutation caused by a variety of factors. The sanitary situation, also the economic and social crisis that ensued, the transposition of exterior or traditionally exterior activities within the home, and the ensuing mental health crisis. Also broader environmental concerns and possibilities offered by technological advancements. What we notice is that 2 levels are morphing. First, what we call the structures, home design, materials, furniture, appliance, but also the intangibles, schedules, behaviors, social bonds, mental health, what we could call home life. And we really wanted to have this study be that broad, both the structures and the intangibles. As a consequence of this, the home of the 2020s is required to meet new criteria. Needs to be more hygiene-centric, more flexible, sometimes more bunker-like, more sustainable, more connected, but also more regulated. A lot of solutions are already underway. They are explored and implemented by real estate players, home developers, home interior designers, consumer electronic companies, and furniture designers. So we've built our model as follows. We identified two dimensions, one being about the origin of the threat, be it real or perceived. Do we think the threat comes from within or from outside? And the second dimension is about resilience, the resilience of the home. Is the home resilient to that type of modifications, that type of threats, or is it fragile? So this helped us build 4 archetypes of future homes. You will have the toxic homes. The threat mainly comes from within. You have domestic violence and abuse, alcohol, and toxic substance abuse. Suicidal thoughts sometimes and acts upon it. Toxic air quality, home hazard, and intentional injuries, poor mental health. And the home is not able to sustain all this. So this has a disastrous consequence on the individual. The second archetype is the Tetris home. You have the same type of co-living stress. But what happens is that the individuals, thanks to this relationship with the home, are able to resist the threat through strategies such as room repurposing, will live, space, shared resources, quick upgrades, timeout options, and perhaps a mental health hotline or such innovative solutions. On the side of the threats coming from outside, you have 2 types of reaction. One is really about closing yourself. It's the bunker home. You shelter in place. You live in perpetuated lockdown even after the threat is not that real anymore. You rely on self-sufficiency and autarky. So you live in a situation of defensiveness. It seems like a resilient home, but it's mainly fragile because it's not long-term sustainable, because it can quickly go back to a toxic home if threats from within arise. However, we have a positive archetype, maybe a preferred future here, which we call the safe haven. So the safe haven is all about cleanable surfaces, broken plants, this sense of homeliness, feeling good at home, storage solutions, great outdoors, so this openness to the exterior. So what we do is we will focus on each of these archetypes to understand which dynamics are behind. So the toxic home is characterized by this presence of an inner threat and a lack of resources to address the threat, which actually leads to vulnerability of its inhabitants. What's interesting is that home toxicity here originates both, once again, from structural elements and intangible elements. Structures, lack of facilities or equipment, materials prone to fire or destruction, disrepair or electrical appliances that are dangerous, poor air quality, availability of toxic substances. And so the intangible elements could be passive smoking, lack of personal space, intimacy violation, coercion from other family members, and the feeling that there's an absence of escape from the toxic environment. So at the core of the toxic home is the notion, the very notion of mental health, and the inability for the individuals to access adequate resources, to transform or to flee this toxic environment. In that case, the safe harbor of the home becomes a source of harm because the inhabitants kind of spiral down in an unhealthy condition, and it leads in worst cases to illness, abuse, rape, murder, and suicide. We try to illustrate it here on this chart, showing how when the threat gets more intense, what happens is that the threat level is higher than the home resilience level. And so you enter from a safety zone to a danger zone. And that's mainly where COVID has been accelerating that factor from some houses, making a very big stock of those toxic homes all over the world. The pandemic has exacerbated toxic homes given two lines of factors. First, because of time constriction, homeschooling, lack of childcare options or home care options, and also reprioritization of tasks, everyday survival of the long-term renovations. While homes have been built or renovated in haste, repairs haven't been made possible sometimes, and compliance was less controlled. As such, the home resilience threshold has been lowered, as you can see on this blue curve. Second thing, because of forced cohabitation over longer periods under stressful conditions, substance abuse, domestic violence, and mental breakdowns have increased with less mental health checkup down. So what happened is that inner threat level has been heightened. So it's been raised so that the home resilience threshold has been crossed more often. We illustrate it with signals. We talked about signals from the future earlier. So here are the signals that help us build that scenario. And they are all quite alarming bits about statistics and some examples. All these trends support the scenario of a growing stock of toxic homes. More household hazards, as the Home Safe Checklist has been trying to build a list of what could be done to escape those type of situation, because 28% of households reported home injury or ingestion of toxic substances during the pandemic. Injuries were often due to falls, and medical ingestions were reported by 6%. Household product ingestion by 4%. Insurers also expect a spike of the house fire, especially in the holiday seasons. And cooking-related accidents account for almost 50% of whole house fires. In terms of health-harming behaviors, such as alcohol consumption, well, it's also increased a lot and even more for women. Food insecurity, as children couldn't enjoy any more food from school programs, and financial uncertainty led to purchasing cheap, poor quality food, causing what we call COVID-19 obesity. There's been also a decline in exercising and more domestic violence. Child abuse has been reported dramatically. Experts are alarmed by the severity of child injuries reported during the pandemic. 1 in 4 women and 1 in 10 women experience intimate partner violence. And this is as dramatic as the pandemic itself. Domestic violence hotlines prepared for an increase in demands, but in some regions, the number of calls dropped. And people believe, the experts believe, it's because victims were just unable to safely connect with those services. And also animals have been actually maltreated. There's been high adoption rates, but also increase in cruelty towards animals. And finally, mental health has been absolutely damaged. Poor housing has been associated with increased risk of depressive symptoms during lockdown. And in June 2020, federal health officials reported 11% of adults surveyed seriously considering suicide over the months. Also, more stress linked to worry, difficulty sleeping, and eating. Our second archetype is the bunker home. It's characterized by the presence of real or perceived exterior threats, pandemic, terrorism, nuclear attack, and a disposition to address the threats based on defensiveness and closure from the exterior, leading to vulnerability for its inhabitants. So retreating tends to weaken social bonding outside of the nuclear cell, suppressing in-person interactions and collective experiences in the extended social sphere. in a famous book called Suicide, the founder of sociology, Emil Durkheim, investigated the anomic suicide. When social bonds and norms get loose, then individuals tend to resort to retreatism, rebellion, and self-destruction. However, there are positive collaterals of bunker homes, which includes that they are more affordable, usually more eco-friendly as well, and they contribute to an overall gain in sustainability, in addition to helping stop the plague spread itself. Some characteristics of the bunker home: its location, usually place of isolation, where it's less populated, more rural, based in nature, or maybe on an island, or even underground. Second thing, the materials used. They are robust, well-insulated, waterproofed material, fireproofed, metal sheets, bricks, concrete, coating, and usually no wood. In terms of design, autarky promoting floor plans and interior design translate with fewer windows and fewer openings, ceiling lights, vertical storing, wall-mounted furniture, galleries, and indoor gardens. In terms of equipment, sustainability-oriented systems and appliances have been used, such as water filter system, ventilation, generator, solar panels, waste removal, and composting. So in the early 2020s, the state-imposed shelter-in-place phase of the pandemic, stay-at-home orders, curfew, lockdown, different names, different countries, well, they all constrain hundreds of millions of people to stay at home and work, learn, live, and sometimes die in captivity. Now, with the pandemic kind of de-escalating, a large number of individuals plan to actually pursue self-imposed isolation or retreat in those isolated places. Some want to upgrade to catastrophe-resistant housing. And in that case, the home really morphs into what we could call a danger-proofed cell from the chaotic and threatening outside world. Many signals here as well. Self-sufficiency, sustainable housing have become more and more acute with the rise of the pandemic. We talk about retrofitting, going back to basics, thinking first of the things we need that are crucial, not the things we need to impress people or to make a statement. In terms of smart equipment, homes will be equipped with lamps, generating ultraviolet radiation, killing harmful viruses and bacteria. Smart home systems will control the temperature and indoor air quality and will automatically clean it. Geothermal wells are gaining in popularity, and in addition to water, they can partially provide a home with heating. Autonomous mini stations generating alternative power will become a reality. There will also be several sources of heating as a safety net, maybe a stove, a fireplace, a solid fuel boiler or fuel generator, solar panels. In addition to producing food, indoor gardens provide oxygen. Phyto walls have been around for years, but we have not explored the full potential for interior design of such solutions. So you could also develop an underground basement with a garden, maybe a mini cheese factory, and even a small winery. But why do we think these are fragile solutions? It's because you can face cabin fever. What happened is that shortly after stay-at-home orders were issued, so sheltering in place reported more negative mental health effects resulting from worry or coronavirus-related stress. And this was more than for the people who are not sheltering in place. The concept gained a new connotation during the pandemic, this concept of cabin fever, so that some cities were actually offering cabin fever kits to families. And then you have a lot of examples of grow your own home companies. The Fab Tree Hab dwelling by MIT, is composed of 100% living nutrients. As it grows from native trees, homes become indistinct and fits itself symbiotically into the surrounding ecosystem. Another example, Wasp and Mario Cucinella Architects are selling hive-like houses, made of clay, 3D printed and carbon neutral. They come with a starter kit of 4 3D printers and a system for picking, mixing, and pumping local materials. Atlas, a company in Texas, makes shelter products and monolithic domes, providing near absolute protection and as close to home as possible, as they describe it. They have some bunker building videos on YouTube, which made, and that was a few months ago, already tens of thousands of subscribers. The video of a luxury bunker home installation actually got millions of views. But more than an escape from routine and urban chaos, the house really now reflects a retreat from viruses and infections, and urbanization takes a step back as we relocate to smaller villages and city suburbs. We also see that during the pandemic, these bunker home designers were unable to keep up with demands because so many people are actually looking for such solutions. And there's a continual demand from people looking for a sustainable future for themselves and for their families. And they say they want to live off-grid, remote, and they want to secure a bunker or sustainable home. So it's not a small trend, it's actually really gaining in numbers. But let's move to our third archetype, the Tetris Home. The game, the Tetris game, you have to align bricks and kind of this constraint of time, the bricks are coming down and so on, and you need to do it faster and faster. So we think the Tetris metaphor really reflects the stress that people had during the pandemic, reorganizing their home with time constraint, space constraint. So we designed the Tetris Home as a junction of this threat from within and a disposition of the inhabitants to cope with the situation by reorganizing the temporal and spatial environment of the home. However, what we notice is such situation, such adaptation is mostly short-term and mostly acting on the intangibles. When the resilience then becomes more structural, is really inscribed in the home. When the home is unable to absorb complex variations from outside, while still promoting a healthy interior environment, that's when we call it the safe haven, which will be our last archetype. So the conditions for making a Tetris home, usually you have all these constraints, an accumulation of home-led activities, work, housekeeping, homeschooling, parenting, hygiene, online shopping, virtual, social, and cultural life. You have a cohabitation of family members from different group ages with different rhythm and different needs. There's also a sense of space constriction, as the home is delimited and it was not originally designed to incorporate all these activities in the same place, of sharing of equipment at the same time. There's also time constriction, instant reprioritization of tasks as they come up and pop up all day long, as chores also add up on top of this. And there's a senses overload, too much noise, too much sense, physical proximity, explicit or implicit tensions between members. As part of the solutions, what we've identified, people in such situation want to repurpose the space, repurpose the rooms. A room which has an initial function is redesigned or reorganized to offer another function. Bedroom becomes an office. A kitchen becomes a learning pod. The living room is transformed into a fitness center, and so on. Furniture are also repurposed. The kitchen chair into a work chair. Apparels also, your fitness clothes are now your work suits. You don't need to dress the same way when you stay at home. And also electronic equipment, maybe leisure equipment such as iPads become a learning tool and you have to share all these resources. So what do? You also do quick upgrades. You try to soundproof the room, to install wall hooks, pull-up bars, room separators, and storage units. There's also some mobility of PCs, appliance, furniture, and people, physical mobility, mental flexibility. There's also some sharing of resources. The working area, the coffee machine, the soundproofed room, and the kitchen table are shared. And timeout options are really important. A place of silence, deconnection times, relaxing activities, intimacy, hiding areas, den room, indoor garden, balcony, soothing pets. So the resilience of the home and the psychological resilience of the individuals echo and reinforce each other in a positive spiraling effect. The home presents initial elements that make it adaptable to endure challenges and changes. As a second step, individuals act upon the home to adjust variables and create a more mentally sustainable environment. And finally, the resilience potential resides in these fruitful interactions between the home and its inhabitants. We have many signs, and I'm sure you have plenty of them too, because from the start of the pandemic, the home has offered a field of experimentation for us to develop coping strategies and mechanisms around this model of Tetris Home. Many of us have spent time doing more than it was built to do, full-time job, caring for and educating children, cooking, preparing what we eat at home. And lockdowns has made more prevalent the concurrent pattern of occupation, whereby all members of the household occupy the home simultaneously. So we've been thinking about simplicity, about personalizing each room, so that everyone kind of finds some comfort and try to reduce anxiety. The entrance, the great front entrance hall, is now a transition place because of health issues. You would also have the mud rooms where you leave your shoes, the utility cupboard at the entrance, sometimes the sink where you see your mask being cleaned. So everything has been kind of redesigned, repurposed towards the pandemic. So the storage is another example. Having sufficient storage place becomes essential. Also, you need place to hide, to conceal your personal items. And in terms of energy, people have been using heating much more to maintain a comfortable working environment. So sometimes at the detriment of sustainability. We have some more examples, but we'll probably move on to our next archetype, so we have the time to cover them all. So the last one, the safe haven, results from the perception of an actual or potential threat from outside and the structural design of the home to oppose such exterior challenges. The safe haven consists in the systemic integration of design elements in order to resist, absorb, and transcend exterior challenges. It's a long time, robust coping strategy. It includes elements of the bunker home, such as smart equipments and materials. However, the underlying driver here consists in an indoor-outdoor fluidity by enabling the inhabitants to pursue a social life, to avoid the negative psychological effects of living in perpetuated fear, and also to incorporate influences and experiences from the exterior within the home life. What we notice is happening in these decades, the urban choice, affordability, square footage, low density, walkability. A refocus on home life improvements the sense of homeliness, multi-purposing of rooms. Working from home as a new norm for many, soundproofing, isolation, comfort, inscribed in the structure to make it possible. The great outdoors being more important with we've seen during the peak of the pandemic how much we missed the outdoors. So now we want more nature, more biodiversity. We want to be able to conduct our hobby outside, to be more relaxed and to socialize again. The home is elastic. It's more spacious, it's stretchable, it's repurposing, and it's flexible. We also go from open plans, where everybody could be in a living place, to broken plans, to allow, this momentary intimacy that some might need, separations, functional privacy, and mobility. Storage is made more attractive. Stacking, organization, privacy, comfort, fashion will improve the way we store. And we go from green and sustainable to clean and hygienic. Filtration, cleanliness of surfaces, touchless equipment, and sometimes that means more electrical and more technological equipment. So the pandemic has revealed limitations, as architects and designers were not prepared for this extraordinary situation. Their work processes requiring physical interaction and collaboration didn't help addressing the ancient challenges quickly enough. So the pandemic presents opportunities for the design work to rethink the way it creates residential buildings. We have tried to map here a lot of what we saw emerge and what is going to stay from the pandemic, because innovations and layouts are likely to gain in importance according to two dimensions. The pink one, more comfort or more healthy stuff, and the blue one, more privacy or more socialization. So you can take a look at this in a few seconds. You see, for example, how the remote work bed or the Zoom room, the sunproofing room enable comfort and privacy, whereas the den room, fitness room, or indoor garden are more health-oriented, but still more towards privacy. Then you have more socialization tools, still including a health aspect, such as voiceless or voice activation or touchless elevator. And then you have the socializing from a distance aspect, the covered patio, the front porch, the fire pit. Your home is open to your neighbors. A few more examples here: natural light and access to nature becoming more important, the great outdoors, indoor-outdoor transitioning, and looking into the future. As a conclusion, whereas the past decades the design world was linked towards more sustainable residential building, the beginning of the 2020s has reminded us that in times of collective chaos, the core function of the home remains its capacity to provide shelter. What does it mean? Well, just a summary of these 4 archetypes. For most of us, shelter in place leads to rearranging our home and adjusting to new requirements. The modularity of the Tetris Home helps people develop short-term resilience and sustain the crisis. But for many, homes were under-equipped to face such challenges. With a limited budget, it meant over-the-roof stress and damaged mental health, while these homes switched to toxic homes. Bunker homes have been on the rise, with a booming demand and market adjustment to meet that demand. If cabin fever makes it an improbable long-term solution, bunker homes have the advantage of encouraging sustainability. And we believe the most viable option is the development of the safe haven homes, which can offer structural resiliency, embrace the outdoors, and create an auspicious environment, so that the individuals are able to climb up the Maslow hierarchy of needs and meet most of their self-realization needs, not just safety. At the conclusion, the 2020 pandemic has shown limitations in the way homes were designed in the recent years. However, it also acted as a disruptor for home designers. Now, it also underlines, the dilemma between resilience on one hand and sustainability on the other, because sometimes resilience means less sustainability, for example, multiplying energy sources. So that's a paradox that architects are actually now trying to solve with creative solutions as to how to integrate those resiliency, and sustainability to create our future's home. Thank you, everyone.